This is a video explaining the document workflow functionality in MindaClient. The document workflow module in MindaClient is to be deployed after the review stage. That means once the application has been imported and once the reviews have been completed, the interviews or pre-selections, depending on the modules you have up here, we then implement the workflow module. Now, the workflow module is a way for you to manage the documents of a student or an applicant post-grant. You can gather documents via upload of documents, they can download documents, and they can also complete forms all through the portal. There's also an approval process throughout this workflow that I will show you. So to get to, once you are happy with the applicants, to get to the workflow builder, so you can build all of your own workflows through the settings in your admin at the top menu here. So in settings, we select workflows. We can then create a new workflow by clicking add workflow, or we can edit a current workflow that we have. Here we also have the option of duplicating out a workflow that will duplicate the sections in this. So I'm going to add a new workflow. I'm going to name it and create this workflow. There's no limit to the amount of workflows you can create. Usually these are created, one workflow per program is usually how it's managed, but there is no limit to how many workflows you can have even within programs. So the initial principle is to set up your sections. I generally advise to set up sections based on timings. So what do you search for first from your students? Usually that's grant documentation or grant authorization forms need to be signed, maybe travel dates need to be established, etc. So there are standard pieces of information that are required for all Fulbrights. So by creating different sections, we can group the documents that we require and make them active or inactive depending on when we need them. So, for example, I'm not going to search for final reports until the end of a particular grant cycle. So, in theory, I would create a section called final reports and make it inactive. This means it's there, but it's also invisible. So it can be turned on in bulk for everyone in settings. We'll come back to that. So once we're happy with the sections that we've created, we've separated out the different documents we're going to require throughout the grant. We're then going to add the documents that we need. When we select the types or the add section up here, we can see 4 different document types. The first is just a standard document type. This can have a number of different functions, but ultimately this is where students will log in, upload a document that you require, copy of passport, for example. You can then select the section you want. So that's going to be travel information because I need a copy of their passport. You can add in any help text that's required. You can default it to whether you want it to be required initially or not, and this can be updated after the fact. You can choose which staff member is notified when the document is uploaded by the student, and you can also choose whether you want to notify the student of a status change, which means whether you approve or decline, which I'll show you. Here, you can also upload a document for them to download. So they can download a document, sign it, and re-upload it here if you want. The next document type is just a general document download. This means it's only available in the portal for them to download a document, not to upload. So this is usually used, for example, on terms and conditions or manuals that they need to read. You can just upload a document for them to download. Maybe it's a particular timetable, or maybe it can be any document really that you want them to download. As before, you can set the section, and here obviously is where you need to upload the document that you want your students to download. I'll show you what that looks like here. Okay. You'll see on the right here, this little button here indicates there's a document to be downloaded. You've uploaded a document here for download, okay? Next, we have the individual document. This is quite a specific type of document that we would use where you can upload a document, an individual document for a student to download. The example I use here is the grant authorization form, where each document is going to be different depending on the student you assign this workflow to. So this is going to be a slightly different approach when we upload our document. In this instance, we're going to go to the student's workflow, that specific workflow, and upload their grant authorization form in the student's workflow themselves. And that way it's going to be individual to them. That's the only difference between the first one I showed you and this one. And all the other settings are the exact same. Okay. Finally, you can also get your students to complete a form. So down the bottom here, we see global form. And this is where you can link them to specific forms in your database to complete. Many use forms such as bank details forms, or maybe you want specific information around emergency contact forms is also used very heavily. So it's a very useful and quick way of getting your students to give you information that you need about their travel, about their orientation, a number of different options here. So this will just link them to a particular type, a particular form through the portal. And I'll show you also how we can make forms in your portal only visible through a workflow. And as before, you can make it required, assign the staff, and notify the student of a status change. You can also give them an option of an explainer document here as well. So once we're happy with our workflow, we can then publish this workflow. Now, on the right, we can see you have the option currently of deleting items that you're not happy with. This option will be removed once we publish. It basically means it stops us removing items that maybe have been used before. So everything else can be changed once it's published, except removing items. So if you I suppose before you publish, you want to make sure that you don't need to delete any of these. However, you can make changes, you can add new items and new sections after publishing. So once we publish, we'll see here. So if we scroll down to the bottom, we can see the active buttons here. So we can see we can't actually make this workflow active until it is published. And it's going to be very clear. We also can change the name up here and any welcome message up here as well. We also have the option of a general explainer document. If you wish to have instructions in a document, you can also put that here too. So I'm going to publish this workflow. And we'll see then it's published. So we cannot remove any item, but we still can add sections if we want. We can add new items if we want. We can change the name, but we also have the option now of making it active. So I'm going to save these changes, okay? So once we're happy with the workflow that we've created for our US students or our scholars or any other program that we're dealing with, we then need to assign the workflow. So if we're to look at a student with a kind of completed set of applications, we can see we tend to deal with our application status here. So we will obviously only assign workflows to students who have been proceeded through the review stage and have been accepted and have accepted their award. Okay, so we will generally use application status or client status to manage this. So we can assign a workflow individually in the workflow subtab under applications, and we can add a new workflow here. Okay, and that adds the workflow, and we can see then the workflow that we've created. We can see the different statuses for approval. We can see all the other options. I'll come back to this screen, but I want to show you how to assign in bulk. Generally, this is what you will do in your programs. So in reporting, we go to workflow reporting. And on the left, we see our filters. So first and foremost, we need to select we don't need to select the workflow, sorry. We need to actually assign the workflow. So as I mentioned before, we're going to use our application status. So if we want to say, select an application status of grant accepted and assign a workflow with that status. We can also select grant years that we want to deal with, for example, and you can use any combination of filters here. So this allows you to identify the students that are accepted and are in a particular program or a particular year. Okay. So when we select the assign workflow, we can select the ones, usually it's select all because we'll have used the correct filters, and we will select the workflow we want to assign. Okay. We then click create workflow, and we'll see here it says create 20 sample workflows. And now there are 20 people who have that workflow assigned to them. They will receive an email saying they have been assigned a workflow. You can create a template for this email in your template section of your system. So once we've actually assigned that workflow, we can view those workflows in bulk by selecting the workflow we want to work on, so sample workflow, and selecting the workflow status report. Okay, so we can now see here that these are we can see here there's 26 workflows here in this particular award. These are the ones that have been started or completed, and these are the ones that have yet to have anything started in them. So if we select one of these workflows, we go straight to that workflow. Many people will opt to save this report to their dashboard. So at the top right-hand side of the report screen, they will opt to save this to their dashboard. And this will then allow them to access this report quickly every time. And we're not going through a lot of clicks to see a particular workflow. It also allows you then to work on each work. Back then, looking at this particular thing, we will look at the individual document upload. So here we upload the individual document for them to download. So this is the grant authorization example I gave earlier. And here's where we will see whether or not they will upload and download their document. Okay, so if we click refresh here on the student side of things, we will see that here is the document they need to, sorry, I've uploaded that in the wrong section. Sorry, delete that. So, sorry, I uploaded that in the wrong section. So if we're to upload the grant authorization, we do that here in the individual document upload. So this is that specific document type that I was talking about earlier. And here we can upload that document for them to download and re-upload. So the student can then log in and see the document that they need to download. So here is that grant authorization document. Please download, sign, and re-upload. This allows them to download the document, sign it, and re-upload it into here, like so. Okay. Once they upload a document, we will see, once they hit refresh, the status of their document going to awaiting approval. Okay. This will then be reflected in their MindaClient system, where the section will go yellow, and we'll see that they've uploaded a document here. If we're to come back to the workflow report, we can see here's Tom Downs, and here's that yellow item here, the grant authorization, that's already updated automatically. So coming back to the other options you have here, you can leave them a note. So if I move this to declined and leave them a note, so they can send them a notification email, and I can leave them a note saying this document is not signed, please re-upload. I can save that note to their system, which will appear. We then must also delete the document we received from the workflow. So it just creates space for them to re-upload the document. So you can delete it here, but you can keep a copy by not removing it from the documents folder. So you can obviously opt to remove it fully, or keep a copy just as a reference. So I've deleted that now, and this will be reflected in the student's workflow. So we can see here, I'm going to move that to decline, sorry, just so that's reflected in the document. So in the student's workflow, they've seen the note here, they see that document was declined, and they now have space to re-upload the document. Looking at the other items then is obviously the document download is here. When I click to download this document, you will get a notification saying that they've downloaded it. So you will see then the timestamp, and you'll see that it is gone to awaiting approval. Okay, so when they download the document, it notes exactly when they downloaded the document, and it goes to awaiting approval. The forms then are managed as with all other forms. We can click to, the student will click on the link for the form, start the form, and submit the form. Okay, I'll submit this now to show you exactly how this looks. So we'll see here, they've submitted the form, it goes to awaiting approval. And when we refresh the MindaClient side, we'll see a copy of the form that they will have completed. So let's see. So in the bank details section, we'll see that's awaiting approval. And we'll actually see a link of when the form was added, when it was submitted exactly. We can also click on this link to go to view that form and the form that they completed. So there's full approval processes throughout. We can approve a document here. Once approved, that will go green. The whole section will go green if all documents are approved within that section. So it should be reflected in the portal. So the student will always immediately see its the current status when it's reflected. When the current status you'll see went straight to approved when I approved the bank details form. So they'll be able to see very clearly what is needed of them, what they need to upload, etc., and what information is still required. Coming back to that report, I showed you the status report. It updates automatically as well. So we can see those 3 documents here that I've approved or declined.